Nice there. So, Andrew, how did you actually get started in terms of setting up Migration Watch?
Well, as you know, I was in the Foreign Service for 35 years, and in those days it was embassies or the consulates who issued visas and so on. And so I was a vice consul, a consul general, ambassador, and I saw throughout those years that the system was a bit of a shambles. So when I left, I thought I should look into that and see what was going on. I bumped into an admirable professor in Oxford who was also concerned about it. So we started with a website. I thought the roof would fall in. Nobody took any notice. It was 6 months before we got into the press. And then we got a really big headline in August 2002 when we predicted that there would be 2 million immigrants in the next 10 years. And we were wrong. It was more than that. So I think we've made several predictions through that last 14 years. We've been pretty well right all the time.
But you were criticised and have been criticised over the years, certainly through the 2000s, of being a one-man or a two-man band, that you didn't really have the sort of the credibility, the science behind the predictions you were making. How did that influence you or impact you?
Well, we just had the support of 75% of the population, and we still do, but quite apart from that, we do have considerable expertise at our disposal. We have consultants who are experts in their own field. Now, but not then. And when you say 75% of the population, how on earth do you get those figures? Oh, every opinion poll you take will show that 75% want to see immigration reduced, 50% by a lot. That's gone on for years. Right. I mean, the other criticism was that you were pandering to bigotry, that you were... Well, but these were the criticisms, you know, at the time. Are you saying they were totally unfounded? Of course. And they were actually quite widely held in the BBC, and I think they still are. But we've just had, I think, Roger Mosey, a very senior executive, and others who've said, actually, they were slow on this story and they should have been a lot quicker. Right, I mean, in terms of what then became known as an open-door immigration policy, those who were anti what the Labour government, what they saw the Labour government doing under Tony Blair and latterly Gordon Brown, and the predictions that you talked about. Now, they argued that it was to fill a need for low-paid labour, that the economy was growing, that immigration was needed at those sort of levels. Did you ever take that argument seriously? Well, it was all looked into very carefully by the House of Lords, actually, by their Economic Affairs Committee. And they did a full report on this, and they concluded that they'd found no evidence for the proposition that net migration, which is what we're talking about, was of any significant benefit. Well, no, let's talk about... We'll come on to net migration specifically, but let's talk about immigration, and we're talking here about not just EU, but from outside the EU, that actually the labour market required low-paid or certainly immigrant work right across that decade. Well, first of all, it's the same point. They said there would be no benefit to the GDP per head of the resident population. It's important to be clear about that. Now, if you're talking to the GDP in total, we're talking about per head of the population. Of course, you have more people, you have a bigger economy. But for the actual resident population, there is no significant benefit. And no one has been able to address that or to tackle that. But you asked about the labour market. There are many solutions if you're short of labour. You can raise wages and draw more people into work. You can change your working methods. You can change your products. There are all kinds of things you can do. Immigration is not necessarily the answer. And if you have other aspects like a housing crisis, it's probably not the answer. But what do you say to those who look to the NHS, for example, and say it just wouldn't work in the way it does without immigrant labour? They look even to perhaps the catering sectors of the economy, rural migration that helps out in agriculture. None of these would function at the levels they do without immigrant labour. Well, those are all different issues, but if you look at the health service, for example... It's all about work. Yeah, but if you look at the health service, we have 30% of doctors who are foreign-born. In Germany or France, it's 5%. We have not trained the people we need. And the same is true of nurses. So immigration is only an answer if you fail to train your own people. It would be much better if we got organised and trained them. Right. What about the net migration target? Because, as you know, the government failed to meet its net migration target. You had conversations with Conservatives when they were in opposition at the time, calling for a net migration target.
You know, how did that come about? How did those conversations come about? Did you even suggest what the target should be?
No, we never suggested what a target should be. It wouldn't be for us. And I don't know what happened within the Conservative Party when they scribble their manifesto. You know, it's a very secret and often confused process. But it was a valuable step, because what it did was to focus government policy, to focus the machine, if you like, on this objective, which they chose, and rightly chose.
And failed to meet.
Well, they failed to meet for two reasons. The major one was that immigration from Europe itself, the European Union, doubled in a couple of years. And it doubled because of the economic crisis in Europe and the high youth unemployment in those countries.
And one might have said people should have foreseen that, and therefore it was pointless to have a target in the first place.
I don't think anybody foresaw that, but it was true at the time.
Well, certainly by 2010 they did.
Well, it was true at the time that we did not control migration from Europe, nor did we control British emigration. But in fact, for the previous 18 years, both those had cancelled out. But this is ancient history. I mean, we
so there's a new net migration target, and we still don't control migration from the European Union.
Exactly. So what we have to do is to get some form of control over European migration, and we also have to
the only way in your mind to do that is how?
Well, we favour work permits, but whether they'll get that is another question. They're talking about cutting benefits, as you know. We'll see what comes out of that. The other thing we need to look at is the non-EU, which is students, and they are the major part of it. 100,000 a year, nobody quite knows where they go. So that needs a lot of work. They will continue, the government will continue on this. It's absolutely clear that they intend to continue, and they will start to get it down. But any kind of success will depend on what they get out of Europe.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you.